evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's Golden City Council Candidates Forum for 2017. We thank you for coming out tonight to listen and meet the candidates for the four ward seats on City Council. My name is Ed Dorsey, and I'll be your forum moderator this evening. I'm a past president of Leadership Golden Alumni Association, who is sponsoring this forum, and I'd like to introduce Stacy Case, who's the current president of the Leadership Golden Alumni Association, to say a few words.
Very few, yes. Hello, I'm Tracy Case, the current president of the Leadership Golden Alumni Association Board. I just wanted to thank you all for participating tonight, and to the audience for coming and being a part of your local city government. So Leadership Golden is a nonprofit, local nonprofit that is with a mission to educate Golden citizens on civic issues. And anytime there is a council election, Leadership Golden hosts a candidate forum, and that's why we're here tonight. I want to thank everyone, but most importantly, Ed, for moderating our session tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I should want to recognize also our partner in this forum, which is the City of Golden, who's providing all the audio-visual effort that's going to take place tonight, and that's Diane and in the back, and Bob in the room doing all the technical work. First, I'd like to introduce the candidates, starting on the audience's left. And I should note, or you should note, if you can read, that they're in ward number order, and make a mention of the fact that there are no incumbents that can run in wards 1 and 2, and that's reason why we got wide open races there, because there's a term limit in Golden where you can only have 2 terms of 4 years each, and then you must seek another position. There's only one candidate in Ward 3 this year. The incumbent, Councilor Pamela Gould, is not running this year, and so we only have one incumbent, Laura, at the end that is running this year. Ward 3 has an unopposed candidate, and that's Jim Dale. So he's got I guess we could call it a free ride. Jim won't be here tonight. When we changed the date of this, he had a prior commitment, and Josh Thompson, who is one of the 4 candidates in Ward 2, will not be attending because he's out of town. So let me go ahead. On the audience's left, from Ward 1, Micah Allen. Then Rob Reed, Deborah Deal in Ward 2, Paul Hazeman in Ward 2, Dan Sung in Ward 2, Mikey Sheridan, Ward 4, and the incumbent Laura Weinberg in Ward 4 also. Let me quickly explain the format for the forum. Each candidate will get 3 minutes to make an opening statement. Then we will ask the candidates to respond to questions developed by the Leadership Golden Organizing Committee. There will be 4 questions, maybe 5 if we have time, it depends. We'll try to take a break roughly midway so that for about a minute to let anybody take care of any problems they have. When we do the questions, each candidate will get 2 minutes to respond, and when all respond, I'll ask if anybody has a follow-up, and you'll get 1 minute for a follow-up. Once the question period is over, each candidate will get 2 minutes for a closing statement, after which we will conclude this forum. But hopefully you'll stick around and meet the people in the room who are nice enough to come out and talk to them, respond to any concerns they may have. Our timekeeper is Bill McKee tonight, who will indicate to the speakers when they have 30 seconds left for their response, and again when there are 10 seconds left. I should note that we are trying to ask the questions in some sort of random order, so we're not asking somebody the questions always first and always last. So we'll be jumping all over the place, so you'll never know who I'm going to ask first for the next questions. By the way, the questions will be up on the screens on each side so that you can see them and I don't have to repeat them if necessary. So let me start with the opening statements, and I will start on far right with Councilor Laura Weinberg.
Going backwards. I like it. Thank you, Ed, and thank you Leadership Golden for hosting this forum tonight. My name is Laura Weinberg, and I'm running for re-election for Ward 4. During my time on council, I have learned to and come to appreciate the fact that our individual backgrounds and experiences really help us to frame the issues before council. So I want to start with a little bit about my background. I'm originally from South Florida, and I moved to the Northeast to attend Brown University. Upon graduation, I moved to the Midwest and lived in Chicago, where I had my first professional job in banking. When my husband, Mike, and I decided to move to Colorado, I entered the University of Denver, where I graduated with an MBA specialized in information systems. And I did that while I was continuing to pursue my career as a director of business analysts. So during all those years of learning and working and traveling, we weren't putting down any roots. And that all changed for us, like many people, once we had children. And we chose Golden for our home and the place where we wanted to raise our daughters. And we chose Golden not just because of the beautiful surroundings, wonderful amenities we all love, the terrific downtown, but also for the sense of community here. We see that sense of community in a lot of ways. Our daughters are now 10 and 12, so they're getting older, and they have had wonderful experiences and formed tremendous relationships and friendships through our local neighborhood schools. We see it in the fact that neighbors in Golden don't just know their neighbors' names, but they plan potluck picnics and gatherings, and in the case of my neighborhood, a whole camping trip to Wyoming for the solar eclipse, all so that we get to spend more time together as neighbors. We see it in our businesses, who not only value their customers, but are also willing to support the local schools and local nonprofits. We see it in all the many local nonprofits here in Golden, so many that spend their time and energy supporting and life in Golden and improving it for all of us. And as I got more involved in my community, first serving on a city board, and then my positions in our local schools, volunteering for our local nonprofits, I came to realize how many wonderful volunteers there are here throughout the city. It's all of these things together that create the sense of community that makes Golden so strong. And it's a big part of the reason why I first ran for city council. During my time on council, and as I talk to people around Golden now, I hear support for work that the city is currently doing and concern for the change ahead of us. I want to continue to be part of crafting the solutions to address the change that's in front of us and continue to work with all of you for another term on City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sheridan.
Hello, my name is Mikey Sheridan, for those of you that don't know me. I'm born and raised Colorado. My mother was raised here in Golden, where she met my father, who was a School of Mines alumni, played football for Marv K. Ended up meeting my mom probably at the Sigma Nu frat house. So I've been in Golden since conception, and this town has always had a way of keeping me in it. Golden is a very, very special place, not only because of our geographic location in Colorado, but the people that live here. And it's the people that live here that make me want to continue living in Golden. It's the citizens that we have, the way that we come together, how friendly of an atmosphere we have here. I've never felt left out or helpless in this town. I've always felt that there's places to reach out, people to come to, people to bring together. And at the same time, there's issues that will arise that will call for all of us to come together. I love how we have all these different organizations, the Backpacks program for kids in schools, the Action Guild down in the corner to help out people. And the city itself, the way that our works are set up, we have so many different things that are just here. They're implemented to make life better for the citizens of the town, and that's one of the things that drew me into city council. I want to run for Ward 4 City Council because I absolutely love this town, and I love my community, and my friends and my family are here. My grandparents still live here in Golden. My folks are up in Conifer now. But some of my best memories as a child were growing up and playing with my brothers here in Golden, Colorado, back when Lions Park had a big smelly pond in the middle of it. I'd like to work towards bringing cohesion between the residents of Golden and the city works that we have, and to strengthen and encourage a working relationship between the citizens and the city itself. I feel that we're in a pretty good spot now, but I also believe that there's room to build on and a way that we can grow responsibly in Golden and develop and implement wise plans for our future.
Thank you. Mr. Sung.
Thank you. Hello, everyone in the audience, and hello, everyone watching at home. I have to give an extra special shout out to Steph, Eva, and Elsa. Hi there. My name is Dan Sung, and I'm running for City Council this November. I'm asking for your vote. Hopefully you've met me in person, or you've had a chance to look at my website, www.sungforgolden.com, so you know a little more about me. But just in case you don't know me, or even if you do, I know you all probably have one big question in your mind. Why vote for Dan? And I have 3 reasons for you. The first is that I love to learn. I often think of myself as a permanent student, and I would go to school forever if I could. As proof of this, I have a Master of Science in Finance and Risk Management from the University of Colorado at Denver. I have a Master of Science in Management and an MBA from Colorado State University. I have a law degree from IU Bloomington. And then finally, I have my bachelor's degree from the University of Chicago. So as you can see, that's a lot of school. I really, really do love school. But I'm really excited about the opportunity to serve on council because I can actually use all of this education to help others. I'll use my genuine understanding of finance and budgeting, process improvement, marketing, law, public policy, strategic planning to help you figure out how we can make your ideas come to fruition. The second reason that you should vote for me is because my work experience is really tailor-made to serve you in Golden. For the last 9 years, I've worked at my dream job as a public servant for the state of Colorado. My role there is to lead and help a diverse group of stakeholders navigate a $600 million healthcare system. I love my job because it's a high-level leadership position where I can advance my vision of governing, which is creating the most open and transparent government, and where I depend on listening and closely working with the public, which means listening to all of you. Prior to the state, I was the Vice President of Government and Community Affairs for Colorado's multifamily housing communities. This is highly relevant because housing policy is an issue that is facing Golden today. So when you add up all my experience, I have almost 20 years of helping people and making their great ideas a reality through open, transparent government. I truly want to work with you. But the bigger thing about school and work is that they've influenced who I am. All that education has really, really reinforced my commitment to lifelong learning. I love to listen because I know I can learn new things from other people. And my success in state government and collaborating with stakeholders has made me realize how rewarding it is to work with others. Everyone says that they collaborate and communicate, but I actually have a track record of doing it. I know how to listen and work with all of you.
Thank you. Mr. Hazeman.
Good evening. I'm Paul Hazeman, Ward 2 candidate with my other 3 cohorts that make us 4. And let me tell you a little bit about myself. After graduating from West Point with an engineering degree, I served in the Corps of Engineers and am a Vietnam vet. Later, after 2 law degrees, I went into aerospace, and my last position in aerospace was Vice President and General Counsel of a Fortune 500 company. I had a lot of executive experience and a lot of problem-solving experience. But that was then, and this is now. Today, Vivian and I live in Golden and love it. This is our home. We have 2 daughters, we have 6 grandchildren. Believe me, we're totally invested in Golden, and we want to make that investment grow. I have been working, and I noted the comments by Laura and Mikey about volunteering. Well, I have been volunteering, and I've gotten a lot of satisfaction. The best part of volunteering is not necessarily just helping out, but you get a lot of satisfaction for yourself from participating and helping. And so I've been volunteering in various areas, and that means hands-on. That's down on South Golden Road with Rotary, picking up some trash, or sitting with children at Golden Terrace for summer lunches. Just hands-on, actually going out and doing it, and that's what really counts. But there is also committee work and board work. I'm on the Parks and Rec board. I'm on the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee and other boards. And policy work is important, and policy work is what the council does. And don't know that I prefer picking up trash on South Golden Road and doing it, but I am a doer, and I expect that on council, you can count on me to be someone who is passionate and can provide some leadership. We have good leadership now, but I look in the back of the room and I see Marv Kay back there, and he gave a great talk to Leadership Golden when I attended it, talking about leadership, and I took his words to heart in terms of honesty, respectfulness, and what it takes to be a good leader. I expect to bring some of that with me to the council and work well with the other city council members. And so as my first priority, it will be not to try to change anything, it will be to fit in, to figure out how the council works, how do you work well with others, and how do we get things done together as a team. So those are my background, my goals, and my desire to knuckle down and work really hard to make Golden the wonderful, livable, heart and soul city that we love.
Thank you, Mr. Haseman. Ms. Steele.
Hi, I'm Deborah Deal, and I have a commitment to Golden. I'm not from here. My father was in the Air Force. We moved around a lot. When I went out on my own, I had my own career, traveled extensively from Moscow to Paris to Tokyo, back and forth. And when it came time for me to make a decision on where I wanted to live, I chose Golden. I'm not here because I was born here or a husband dragged me here or a job or anything. I picked Golden, and I am committed to Golden. I will, just to show you, or just to explain what I've been doing since I've been here, I have taken Leadership Golden, Leadership Jefferson County, the Golden Citizens Public Works Academy, the Golden Police Citizens Academy. I have been working on the Economic Development Commission and the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee. In addition, I have worked with I have served as a county-appointed trustee for the Jefferson County Public Library, which is a $39 million operation. And I have established the Jeffco Innovators Workshop and the International Women's Day celebration. Perhaps more indicative of my commitment to Golden is not just the fact that I live here and that I have engaged in as many activities and meetings and committees and work as much as I can. I own a business here too. I literally put every penny in my pocketbook into a business in Golden. And I am committed to seeing that it goes forward, Golden goes forward in the future, but yet that we retain our wonderful history and a sense of community and what makes Golden Golden, and that's the engagement between all of the residents, the diversity of our neighbors, and and our commitment that we all share together to Golden. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Ed. My name is Robert Reed. On the ballot, it will be Robert. Everybody calls me Rob. I'd like to start tonight by thanking the Leadership Golden for sponsoring this forum and the current and former city council members in the room. You've made Golden a great place. Last of all, I'd like to thank my wife, Kristen, for supporting me in this. This is not something I would ordinarily do. I am not a natural politician. I don't have the gift of gab. I am not the life of a party. What I am is a person that people come to when they want me to listen. I'm a person that people come to when they want to discuss problems and come up with solutions. I think these are attributes that anybody seeking public office should have, and I hope to bring those to City Council. To me, politics is people, and we as representatives of our government need to listen to our people, and that is a major part of why I'm running for Ward 1. I've been an attorney for 27 years, been a solo practitioner for 20 years, so I've run my own business that entire time. I've never advertised my practice. I've never even set up a website. My clients are referred to me by colleagues and other clients because those people trust me. They know that I'm honest, that I have integrity, and I will treat their clients, their friends, fairly and professionally. I am a guy that people come to when they want fair and practical solutions. I do my best to look at problems and find practical, cost-effective solutions for my clients. My goal is to bring some of those traits to council as well. My history in Jefferson County is my entire life. I grew up on Lookout Mountain. I'm a proud member of the Golden High Class of 1982. I've known Golden since the 70s. I've lived in Golden since 2003, and I've worked in downtown most of the last 15 years. I've seen the ups and downs of our town. I've seen what Marv Kay started and what Marjorie Sloan is carrying on, and I so much appreciate all that hard work that they've put in. I also have a track record of serving Golden. I've been on GURA for almost 4 years now. I've been the chairman. I'm in my second term there now. I was a soccer coach for many years in Golden, and I've got to tell you, you know Golden when you've coached people's kids. There are a few issues in Golden that I'd really like to focus on if, and hopefully when I'm elected. They're smart development. Change is inevitable in Golden, but we can control the change. We can keep our community feeling like it is today. I also want to preserve Golden's character, and I look forward to meeting each and every one of you after this if you have any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Mr. Allen, finally we got to you.
So, thank you, everybody, for coming out on a Thursday night. My name is Micah Allen, and I'm running for Ward 1 as well. I have a unique background compared to a lot of others, which I think could allow me to bring a unique perspective to council. I'm an engineer by training and by personality, and that means I tend to make decisions by defining issues as something measurable and then agnostically evaluating opportunities towards how they direct. Although I'm proud of how our city has been managed to date, I believe this approach would be valuable in today's political climate. Before telling you about my priorities in Golden, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what I've done elsewhere. I'm a Colorado native who's focused on practical environmental and economic development. I have spent my whole career working on solutions that are win-win because they focus on the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profits. It's easier said than done, so as a young man, I started out by looking for examples. As a Fulbright scholar to Denmark, I was fascinated to learn about a tiny nation that continually gets global recognition for its livability, prosperity, and sustainability. Upon returning to Colorado, I was curious how this approach could work at home. I worked for a small nonprofit, upgrading affordable housing, installing renewables, and working with farmers. In every case, the projects only happened because they helped people and saved money. They just coincidentally were environmental as well. Curious about a bigger context, I then worked as a technical liaison for most of the large utilities in North America. They had discovered that it was more profitable to save energy than generate it, but needed help figuring out how. My wife Erin and I started wondering if this could work elsewhere in the world, so we moved to East Africa to learn, grow, and see if we could contribute. I started a factory in Kenya for an NGO to manufacture high-efficiency cook stoves for poor families. Not only did the stoves sell because they were healthier and saved money, but I discovered the value of applying this engineering perspective to managing a team. I'd hired a couple dozen Kenyans to manufacture these stoves, and none of us had ever done anything like this before. So I started out by defining what our metrics are and how we would compare, and told them how I thought it would work. We quickly figured out that a lot of my ideas weren't very good, but because it was a transparent process, people felt empowered to contribute their ideas and bring it up. Today, I hope to bring a similar approach to Golden City Council. When our daughter Tavia was born, we knew it was time to put down deep roots home in Colorado. We found the best city on the planet and built our life here. I work at McKinstry on the north side of town, also doing something similar. With McKinstry, I was proud to have an opportunity to actually work on Golden's sustainability initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. Now on to the questions. There are 4, maybe 5 of them, and I assure you that they all have citywide applicability, regardless of what your ward is, which most things in the city of Golden do. I will be happy to repeat any question if needed, and they probably will be, because I found out that we won't be having them on the screens due to a technical issue. So don't hesitate to ask what the question was. We're going to start with Ms. Deal, and I will call the name of the other candidates to respond in some sort of random manner. You will have 2 minutes to answer each question. So here's question number 1. What is your vision for Golden and some of your key priorities for your potential 4-year term on City Council? So we're looking for vision and priorities. Go ahead, Deborah.
Vision and priorities. Vision, retaining the historic flavor and ambiance of Golden long-term. Keeping the Denver metro area from encroaching on top of us and turning us into a homogenized city that's like every other little city that could be anywhere. My priorities for this are obtaining some more open space when and wherever we can possible to protect us from this encroachment, to increase the police force a little bit. Chief Kilpatrick has asked for 5 more staff members, and I think that's something that we should do because the Denver area, everything seems to be coming west. So I want to make sure that we maintain the safety and community of this area. I'd also like to see that we at least investigate the opportunity to set an architectural standard for the historic district and the downtown district so that we don't have modern buildings coming in that look out of place and change the overall look and flavor of Golden. And let's see. There's so much more. Well, I do want to also see the situation with Heritage Road finally determined. Are we done with it? I know we just had a report come back in August of this year. I would like to see that put to bed as well, and I'd like to continue to encourage as much engagement within the community as possible. And by working on Golden United and other organizations, I'm hoping to do that. So, thank you.
Mr. Haseman.
The vision is one that we've had since 2011, and that's Golden Vision 2030. We've tried to put that in place through the comprehensive plan that was enacted the same year, and we put various neighborhood plans together which have been consistent with that, and I would like to see that continued, and my priority would be to have those values that are set out in Golden Vision 2030 maintained and improved. The newest resolution in the city of Golden is resolution number 2585, signed today, which will authorize the formation of the Golden Investment Forum Task Force, a task force which is designed to figure out how are we going to fund these many priorities. Being on the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee, I see that we have over $40 million in unfunded projects, and we need to find a way to pay for them. And so that is what that investment forum will do. It'll have representatives from each of the commissions and boards in the city, as well as at-large members appointed by the council. So this can be the way we breathe new life and new vitality into the Golden Vision 2030, which has been our hallmark for the past 6 years. That it would be my first priority, is keeping Golden golden and making it even better. Those values, to have a city with those kinds of values is just remarkable. And it's not just to have them, it's to do them. It's to practice those values. And so that is my first priority. One that you don't think about so much is supporting schools. The city does a lot to support schools. I'd like it to do more. I'd like it to be coordinated. We have staff members that are helping left and right, but I think we can do a better job, coordinate that effort, and make our schools more outstanding than they are now. So that would be, a second priority. There are many, many more things. What do I bring to the council? Well, it sounds kind of tough, but maybe it's a sense of humor.
Mr. Allen.
Thank you. The number one thing I'd like to bring to City Council is the process that I outlined in the beginning. I've been watching a lot of the past videos of City Council meetings, and a lot of times it's not an opportunity to focus on one's personal passions, but it's ironing out issues between neighbors. It's traffic calming, it's parking, it's things like that need a process around it. One thing I would like to bring to City Council is a process of identifying what the real issues are, identifying practical, measurable metrics, and working towards them. And so I would like to bring that to every decision at City Council. That being said, I do have some really strong passions and things that I would like to use the opportunity of being on City Council to promote. Number one is deliberate development. Growth, while inevitable, must fit the culture of the community it joins, not redefine it. I think nobody here wants to see those big box houses that are going up across Denver to appear in Golden, and we want to maintain the aesthetic culture of the city. At the same time, limiting growth has the impact of making it difficult for young families or older families to set down roots here because it becomes unaffordable. I have some ideas of ways to help that and encourage the diverse community that we've all grown to love. Second, I'm really interested in practical sustainability. There's a lot of ways where we can save money and energy and water and make a healthier environment without making a sacrifice. Finally, I'm really intrigued with municipal broadband. This time last year, the city voted to allow the City of Golden to explore municipal broadband, and now it's time, I think, to figure out what that solution would look like. Thank you.
Mr. Reed.
Thanks, Ed. My number one priority for Golden is to maintain our small town feel. We all moved here because of that feel. I moved back here because of that feel. So we need to work with the Planning Commission and Council to make sure that there are ways to preserve that feel and not have the feel that you have in Sloan's Lake or the Tennyson neighborhood where suddenly you're walking through a concrete canyon. I think part of that is to update our neighborhood plans. When those plans were implemented, it was during the recession for the most part. It is time to update them because we have much more outside pressure for development. I want to see transparency and openness between council and the citizens. I want our citizens to have the same time to discuss issues with council that a developer has. We don't necessarily have that right now. We are given a 3-minute increment to respond or to give public comment. We can't put together a group that can present a rebuttal to a developer's position. I want to see safety addressed. We talk about walkability, we talk about mobility, but it's really hard to walk across Ford and Jackson. It really is not safe. And the people in Lewis Court are a little older than I am. They really struggle with it. I'd like to see that addressed. Finally, I would like to see economic diversity addressed with affordable and attainable housing. GURA had an initial presentation from a developer to do an affordable housing project on Colfax. I think that's going to gain some traction. I think it's a wonderful thing to see. But I'd like to see the economic diversity throughout the city, which is one of the things that Vision 2030 talks about, so that we don't have little islands of people who have less means. The economic diversity is just good for the overall health of our citizenry. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you. Let's see, Mr. Sung.
So for me, the vision, the neat thing about Golden is there's so many thoughtful people in this city, and that's what I very much appreciate. And I think Vision 2030 really reflects that. And so for me, the priority is not so much developing a new vision, but really executing on that vision. And I think it's really easy to summarize it where it is really all about living, working, and playing in Golden. And so when you really look through Vision 2030, that's what that document represents. And so for me, it's really about executing that vision. And so I think in terms of how you do that, that's where I believe that we need to continue to push in terms of that decision-making process where we really put in a strong framework where the entire community, city staff, the neighborhoods, the other affected stakeholders really have a voice in really shaping the priorities under that vision. And so to me, that's what I'm really interested in, is giving all of those stakeholders a voice, and really based on that extensive feedback and working with all of those stakeholders to really identify what the priorities are in terms of how we execute that vision. And so I think that my role on City Council, because it's a policy-making body, is to really not necessarily inject my opinion at the outset of the process, but to really listen to others and see where they're coming from. And so that's what I would really do, is really focus on facilitating those discussions and saying, what can we do to make this happen? And I think just from a substantive standpoint, that's where it really comes into play, where you have to look at issues like economic development, transportation, housing. Those are areas that really effectuate, or how you get to that vision and how you execute on that vision.
Mr. Sheridan.
Thank you, Ed. My vision of Golden is that it's a family and friend oriented community with a lot of historic values. What I would like to see with the vision is to see this continue in the future. When I grew up in Golden, it was kind of like the Andy Griffith Show. It's like you walk down the street and everybody you walk by, you say hi, you know their name, they say hi back, you wave. It's very courteous. You're not on your phone staring at your feet. So community orientation is really big to me, and historic preservation. That's one of the things that people come to Golden for. We're a town that thrives off of tourism dollars. In the winter times, those are our hard months. A lot of people don't really want to walk around Golden when it's windy and cold outside, but in the summer times, we absolutely thrive off of that tourism that comes here. And I believe those tourists come here because we have that historic value and we have that friendly attitude. I talk to people day in and day out who are visiting Golden that say they can't believe how nice everybody is here. And all I hear from them is, man, I want to move here. And it's like, yeah, I can't blame you. Everybody probably wants to move here. But along those lines, too, we only have so much space. The geographics of Golden, we're surrounded by certain boundaries. We've got mountains and cliffs and open space that thankfully will help preserve this small feel of our town. It can only really get so big before we're not really in Golden anymore. as far as what I would like to do with this vision, I would like to make sure that it is livable for low-income families or those that are retired on fixed incomes. I think these are going to be crucial things in the future when you see property taxes increase and these people on these fixed incomes, it's fixed, so they're going to have to figure a way out about that. I would also like to strengthen the relationship between the city and the School of Mines. I know there's been a lot of crossover with them in the past, and I think if we can work better together, we can find a solution to create a better traffic and parking system. And then also just to advocate for the businesses in town. If there's something that we can do to help a business thrive and in a responsible way, I think we owe it to them to do that for them.
Thank you. Ms. Weinberg.
Thanks. Well, going last this time, there have already been a lot of good points stated. And I'll also say that my vision for Golden is not different from our shared Golden Vision 2030. That is what we've all laid out as a community. And it defines our values and those things that are important to us, most of which have already been set up here. And maybe we have some new people who've come to Golden and moved to Golden from bigger cities, from other places, that don't know of our shared values and don't know of this Golden Vision 2030 that we've put forward. So that is one of the things that I'd like to see over the next 4 years on council, that we introduce new people to our city about what it means to live in Golden and what our shared values are and our shared vision. Some of the other priorities that I have, let's continue doing the work that we've begun, improving processes. City as old as Golden has done things a certain way for a certain amount of time, and it's always important to be continually reevaluating and improving how we do business as a city. That includes improving communications. There are a lot of new communication tools. We've made a lot of changes over the last 4 years in how the city can communicate to residents, businesses, folks wanting to interact with the city. And also new opportunities to engage residents. We've started talking about that initially on council, and I think that's really important because residents need to be engaged not just when there's a big project or potential problem, but when the city needs their feedback and input. I'm going to run out of time. There are so many other priorities and issues, and I will just have to talk about them either for another question or later on. Thank you.
Anybody have any follow-ups? I'll give you a minute. Okay, let's move on to question 2. What do you think are the most important issues facing both short-term and long-term? And elaborate them a little bit. I know you only got 2 minutes, so. And let's see, we'll start with Mr. Allen.
So the big issues dovetail nicely with the priorities I outlined before. I think we all see the pressure of development coming across the whole Front Range. It's not only changing the way neighborhoods look, but it's changing traffic patterns and it's changing the feel of the communities we're in. I think every person here came to Golden because it's a special kind of place. And so I think one of our number 1 priorities is to maintain that culture. And so not only is it to limit development, though, as I also brought up, affordable housing I think is really important. Golden has a long history of people from different groups coexisting happily. There's very well-off people. There's also people that are less well-off. And it's important for Golden's culture to maintain that balance. One way I think Golden can do that is look at where the communities that are looking for affordable housing can actually save other parts of their bills. My big passion is sustainability, that's energy and water efficiency. And so I think there are opportunities for the city to encourage upgrading our affordable housing stock. When I came back to Colorado and was working for a nonprofit, we often halved utility bills for the families we worked in. And that had a really significant impact. $1 saved off of a utility bill is just the same as $1 saved off of a mortgage or rent. So there are opportunities to keep things affordable and promote smart development that does not change the culture and the aesthetics and the historic nature of our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reed.
Thanks, Ed. I share Mr. Allen's view about one of our biggest issues is the pressure for growth. As I mentioned earlier, developers from outside our community are pushing hard to build in our community. They don't have a sense of our community. I think that we really, as a city, need to consolidate resources and address that by following the neighborhood plans, by following Vision 2030, and prioritizing a process and procedure to preserve what's in there and not give a lot of leeway that ultimately results in higher density, higher mass of our building envelopes. I don't think we need to rush for development right now. I think we can tap the brakes and build out more slowly. We have ongoing pressure from the Beltway coming in. We're going to have construction going on along 93 for years that's going to drive traffic onto Ford and Washington that are our only north-south corridors through the city. We need to deal with safety along those all the way from 93 to Johnson Road to Highway 6. We have a lot of aging residents. We have a lot of people with limited mobility. We need to make sure they're safe in our community. We need to collaborate with our other government entities, Jefferson County, Lakewood, Arvada, to address affordable and attainable housing. Golden is too small a community to address affordable housing unless we can restrict it to our residents. We can't absorb affordable housing needs for the whole metro area. The same is true of attainable housing. So those are the issues that are coming. I'm not going to tell you I have the answers right now. There are a lot of smart people in this room, and hopefully we can get together. Thank you.
Mr. Sheridan.
As far as my top 3 points of interest, I would say that, as Mike said, responsible development, and then being resourceful and sustainable with that. I think by far that's probably the most significant thing that we're going to face in the future, just by looking at the growth rate of a state on a whole. I think when I was a kid, the state's population was around 3 million, and I think now that's just the population of Denver itself. So that's definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration, and also in a sustainable manner. And that's one thing that I do like, that I've seen through the city and the way that we work with our new building codes, is when we do build new stuff, there are certain requirements that they need to hit for sustainability. And I'd like to work towards that and to keep that a top interest when it comes to development. Also with that development is environmental impacts within our infrastructure. We live next to a lot of wildlife. It's always an issue. We have a special crossing on Highway 6 for that. They live in our home as well, so we need to make sure that we're working to make sure that the people and the wildlife can coexist at a pace that's okay with our growth. And then also I believe, issues that I talk with when I knock on people's doors seems to be traffic and parking, which I know Laura has worked a lot with. And I would like to continue to work with that, because as population grows, your parking and your traffic problems will grow as well. And with these people moving in, we need to make sure that our school systems are going to be able to integrate with the growth. Are they going to be able to handle these capacities? And are we budgeting that into our plans as a city itself? And working towards those goals and doing it as a community and finding out what you want and implementing that into our decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Sung.
So for me, this the biggest issue for really, this is where I think finance comes into play, and where you need to prioritize that, where money does make the world go round, and you do need money to do things. When you look at our roughly $70 million annual budget, you can see that much of that is already allocated, and really what you understand when you really look at what the city does is that money is very well spent. It's a very efficiently run city. city, and so you can't really squeeze any more out of the money. And so the question is, how do you grow revenues? And for me, I think the solution starts with really being open and creative. But I think in the first instance, I would put on the table some ideas that really encourage that driving that revenue. And so, for example, I think in the city charter, section 1151 really limits the city in terms of providing incentives to businesses. And so I think that that's something that needs to be we should look at. Where I think that I'm not suggesting repealing it, but perhaps some in between or some kind of compromise in that area where rather than making it the Wild West, you would consider something along the lines of smart, thoughtful incentives for businesses, the right businesses to come in. I think that that's not the solution alone. I think you have to put together some of the other things that are possible solutions. So that would be the idea of buying golden and really supporting our existing businesses to really help them drive revenue and market our existing businesses so we can drive revenues in that way. And so I think that for me, it's very much an economic issue, a finance issue, where we need that money in order to do the great things, not only to maintain our infrastructure, but to do the fun things that we all love to do.
Thank you. Ms. Weinberg.
Well, you mentioned important issues, short-term and long-term, and one of the first things I learned serving on council, having come from the business world, is short-term and long-term are very different in government than they are in private companies. When we think short-term, maybe we think, what are we going to do in a year? Long-term for a city councilor might be in their 4th year, but long-term for cities are what's 20 years from now. And a lot of that is driven by how long it takes to get funding for some of these projects and priorities. So there are different time frames when you look at short-term and long-term. A lot of what I think of is the work that we do short-term, what we're doing now, that's going to maybe come to fruition many years down the road. And some of those issues that I see are important right now are catching up where the market is on issues like housing. And by that I mean we have not changed our definitions, our zoning, with things that have come out in the market like Airbnb, co-housing, boarding houses, shared housing, all of these things that are out there now that we haven't addressed yet as a city. That's important to me in the short term because the market's going to continue to innovate, continue to put pressures on our housing market, and we need to be prepared to deal with them. The other issue that we're working on short-term that will have some long-term impacts has already mentioned, and that's the first step of having the investment task force. And that's really collectively, what can we agree on as residents that is important for us to fund? Where are we willing to put our money and our tax dollars in all the competing priorities that we've said we value? We value safe and quiet neighborhoods. We value affordable housing. We value sustainability. We have so many of those, and yet we can't fund any of those projects unless we come up with new sources of income, new ways to fund those. And finally, in my last 10 seconds, it's really working regionally to address big, thorny issues like housing, homelessness, and transportation funding that affects all of us here in the metro area. Thank you.
Mr. Haseman.
Thank you, Ed. I think the issue that is confronting the city most importantly is the growth issue and containing it. And we have a 1% cap, but boy, we still see more people and we get a higher density. We need to work with the council and with the planning commission and others to contain that growth. Councilor Weinberg mentioned Airbnbs. We have approved 8 in the city. We have approved 8 short-term rentals. And if you go online, you will see that there are many, many more than that. And so that comes to the question about, do we have the enforcement tools to be able to enforce what we have? Well, do we want to put money into enforcement? That sounds kind of harsh. But at the same time, if we're going to control that growth, we're going to have to not only look at zoning and see if we can make the changes that might be needed to contain it, but also perhaps some more focus on enforcement. Another good issue that, you know, I don't know if these are good issues. If they're issues, they're probably, you know, problems for the city. But I don't mean to, Councilor Weinberg, I'm sorry, but you know, the idea, and I agree with you, but the question about communications, the city is doing much better with communications. I think back a couple of years when we had some issues on Heritage Road, and now I look at the communications that have just been sterling on 6th and 19th and now on Washington Avenue, and I'm pleased that we are improving communications, but it never can be good enough. And I know the council is trying to put in a website that's going to let citizens be in touch with the city more easily than through Nextdoor. And I think that's a great idea. That's the kind of communication improvements we need. So communications, improved communications, and containing growth would be two priorities I think the city should tackle.
Thank you, Ms. Steele.
Well, there's been some great issues brought up here and concerns, and I really can only echo everybody that's gone before me. I doubt that Tom Golden in 1858 had any idea that this town would end up in this kind of situation, facing the growth and encroachment issues that we fear today. We have some good plans. The city council currently and the city councils before us have done a lot of work. In addition to Golden Vision 2030, we have the comprehensive plan, and we have 9 neighborhood plans and 3 urban renewal area initiatives. So we have some good basic plans laid out for what we would like to see. We just need to be a little bit more proactive, I would say, go out and recruit developers and real estate folks and see if they can work with us to see out the plans that we have and the visions that we already have arranged, we already have down on paper, and that have been created by the city councils before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any follow-ups?
Yes, I'd like to follow up just a little bit on the finance issue. When we talk about these investment forums, this task force, you know, that's the point about finance. You know, I don't think I have an answer on how to finance the future and the wants and desires and needs of the city. But this year, the budget is pretty much a maintenance budget. If we want to have new amenities that we all desire, we're going to have to find ways to pay for them. And the Blue Ribbon panel in 2012, you know, looked at Golden Vision 2030 and said, guys, how are we going to pay for all this? And we're looking at it again, and we're going to have to take the time it takes, a serious time. It's going to be very important and very big for the city over the next couple of years. It's not going to be right away to figure out how we're going to come to grips with financing the types of amenities that make this city wonderful.
Any other follow-ups?
I'd also like to reiterate on finance. As far as the businesses go here in Golden and the revenue streams that are generated from them, most of our businesses here in downtown Golden are large contributors to a lot of different charitable organizations here within Golden, within the state, and within the nation and the world. And therefore, I think that it'd be responsible of the city to cooperate with these businesses and be charitable towards them, and also offer these incentives for their growth. And with that, I think we could work towards meeting some of these unmet budget goals.
Yes, Mr. Sung.
And for me, you know, I obviously focused on finance in my response, where I think that is the fundamental issue. But what really preceded that, or the assumption that I made, and what I am very committed to, is really creating, once again, that framework for communicating, where in order to really vet these ideas in terms of financing options or any other issue, whether it's transportation or housing, you need a very strong communication process process. And so that's what I would really put into place, where the motto is right people, right time, right issues in the right way. And so you really have to do all of those things, not just some of them, but all of them, where you need to have that open mindset, that learning mindset to really vet the issues carefully and thoughtfully. And so that's the framework that I would really apply to every issue, including financing.
Thank you. Anybody else? Deborah?
I was just going to say, it's not just about raising more money and bringing more money in here, because somebody's going to have to provide that money, and it could be us. I think it's a matter of prioritizing what we want to do. We have this long laundry list of wonderful things to do, including expanding Splash Park and this and that and the other, and I read like 50 pages worth of ideas that people have, but we really have to come together as a community and prioritize what we want to do and what's important to us. And this task force hopefully will be a good step in the right direction for that.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to get on to question 3. Concerns have been expressed recently by citizens in Golden about population growth, housing density, zoning, and traffic. What is your view on how to deal with these impacts going forward?
Repeat it. I missed one. Could you repeat it? I missed one of those that you said. Thank you.
The next one's even longer.
Okay.
Concerns have been expressed recently by people in Golden about population growth, housing density, zoning, and traffic. What is your view on how to deal with these impacts going forward? And these things have been expressed in different boards and to council as well. So I got to start with somebody. That would be Laura.
Oh, see? glad I asked that question again, right? Thank you. That is such a multi-part question. There's no way I'm going to tackle all of those in 2 minutes. So we do hear that a lot from people. I hear it every day when I talk to folks in some fashion or another. It's a lot of it in the conversation boils down to change. And a lot of these areas of concern, there's population growth, but in Golden, it is restricted. We only grow by less than 1% a year. So some of that population growth is outside of the city. And the question becomes, how do we manage the impacts of that growth, because we are not directly in control of it. Some of it around housing density is related to zoning. And everybody knows that property that's been 4 lots for the last 100 years eventually could, with one house, eventually could be split once that property is sold. So that's really hard when you've lived across from that big property and that single home to realize that it's been sold by the family and now a developer is going to put something new there. These are difficult conversations to have. In many cases they're community conversations, but in a lot of cases they're personal conversations with that neighbor that lives across the street from that property. So there's no one solution, there's no one right conversation to have about those types of concerns around density and zoning. Traffic, yes, I have talked traffic and parking for 4 years now. I know a lot more about parking management and traffic studies and traffic counts than I ever would have anticipated. It comes from living in a desirable place. It comes from living in a place that not only other people want to live, but other people want to visit. Other people want to work here. We have a lot of primary employers that bring people in Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, which are our busiest times. So there are a lot of competing concerns that affect these things, including, and I haven't mentioned the one that, again, has been big for the last 4 years, and that's the School of Mines and their students and growth as well. So, yeah, there's lots to talk about on that issue, on that question. Thanks, Ed.
Mr. Sheridan.
We are growing, and I can't argue with that. I recently went to school for real estate, and it's location, location, location. And the better your location, the more valuable your real estate's going to be. So we are seeing a lot of a lot of flipping going on in the Golden area right now. We're seeing a lot of these lots being developed from 1 house to 4 houses. Some lots will allow 5. So the density is changing in that aspect. Just right next door to me, there used to be a house with a sister-in-law house behind it and a front yard and a backyard, and now it's just one large foundation without any yard. So that's definitely something we're looking at. That's going to be a harder thing to touch on because it's hard to tell people what they can and can't do with their asset, and that is, in the most part, most people's most valuable asset. As far as the growth goes, the 1% cap that was put in place is one thing, but 1% grows every year. So the way we zone this, we got to be looking at is there areas where we can do multifamily developments? Is there areas where we can put in these low-income housing projects? Or are we going to have restrictions on future developers to say, if you're going to put in this development with X amount of units, we need a certain percentage to be allocated towards that low-income or fixed-income housing? As far as the traffic and parking goes, I said this a few years ago, and the same stays true with me today. I believe that working with the school is going to be the only way about it. Colorado School of Mines is a rather large school, and they have a history for selling more parking permits than they have spots, and then those students end up in town. I think collaboration between the city and the school could be a good thing, and that could help free up some of the space that's in town. As far as our streets go, we have bike lanes and we have traffic lanes, and you got to think of it like an hourglass. You're only going to get one or the other. If you want more traffic to flow through, you need to open up those traffic lanes. If you want more bikes to go through, you need to narrow those traffic lanes. And we can't really expand upon that just due to geographic boundaries of our streets.
Steele.
Oh, okay. Pete. It's busy taking notes. There were some good comments there. I think we have to take it in different stages. For one thing, with downtown, I think we have to preserve our single-family lots in the historic preservation area. We need to not allow, I went to a historic preservation meeting the other night, and a piece of land that had one single home on it for years and years and years and a beautiful garden on it is now going to be turned into a triplex. So, and it's going to totally throw out of whack the whole area. And it's not the fault of the Historic Preservation Board, it's the way that the zoning and the commercial areas overlap. But I just want to say that where we can in downtown Golden, we need to keep the density where it has been and not build up big multifamily and huge density projects. If we want to do those density projects, multifamily, let's look down South Golden Road. There's an opportunity for some renewal down there. And why don't we try to look at moving the multifamily issues down there? Another thing I'd like to throw out is that I think we need to look at how we can expand our tourism from aside just being over the summer when it's so heavy. What can we do to encourage people to come during the winter, the November through April times as well? And of course, we need to work with Colorado School of Mines, like my colleagues have already mentioned. So
Thank you. Mr. Sung.
So just like Laura's response, I'm fairly overwhelmed by the number of issues that were in that question, and I certainly can't answer all of them. But I think the way that I put my arms around that is really, I think the way that you address all of those issues is by having an incredibly strong process, a decision-making process, where it goes back to my previous answer of communicating with the right people, at the right time, on the right issues in the right way. And so I think all of those are the right issues. And so I think you apply that decision-making process where you say, those are the issues that we're going to tackle. And now, so going through that framework, you say, find the right people. And so I'll just use transportation as an example, where I think that, of course, RTD would be a natural stakeholder, the neighborhoods, the city staff, the U.S. Department of Transportation, Colorado Department of Transportation, and Colorado School of Mines. I mean, I think you go after and look for the right stakeholders, and that's hard work, but that's what you need to do, is you need to find the right people, and you just keep going through the process where, for me, the right time means having those conversations early and often. You don't have those conversations after one group has made a decision. You involve everybody, you listen to everybody, you really understand what people's concerns and issues are, and then from there, you can do it in the right way where you're really open to those ideas and you're really listening to all of those stakeholder groups and you're saying, where is there common ground? Because almost certainly there will be, and so that's what you work around, is building an answer to those very complicated policy solutions by going through that really strong decision-making process. And I think that's what I bring to the table, is I have a very strong understanding of that.
Mr. Allen.
It's a big question, and I have the magic bullet. I know the answer. Not really. I understand why people are concerned, and the growth and change is daunting, especially when it happens all at once. 1% kind of sounds small until it's your neighbor, and that changes things quickly. But one issue I'd really like to address of that is the transportation issue. I live in South Golden and I work in North Golden, and there is literally no public transportation between the two. That drives traffic, that drives parking problems. Parking, even though it sometimes can be free, it always has a cost, because that's what we decide to spend our real estate on, is parking spots. So I think even if no one here would like to take public transportation, supporting public transportation will actually resolve a whole multitude of other problems. That's part of why I was so troubled when I learned that RTD is thinking about cutting back service to Golden, and that's strenuously the wrong way I think we're going. I think it's important for Golden to support public transportation in order to both integrate lower-income community members, but also to reduce traffic, improve safety, and reduce our parking problems. Another thing I would like to bring up is parking, because that's a recurring theme. Recently, we've started getting charged for parking, and I hate parking tickets. I'm not going to deny that. That being said, parking has a real cost, and if we don't charge that to the person that is doing the parking, then those parking spaces get taken over, and that's where our city gets developed. By putting a small fee on it, or setting for a 2-hour requirement, meant a lot of mine students wouldn't just park downtown all day. They had to go find another option and maybe bike into school. I think solutions like that really do help these problems.
Thank you. Mr. Reed.
One of the issues that we have is that we have a 1% growth limit that the citizens passed and the citizens want to enforce. It doesn't mean we have to meet 1% every year. If we don't meet 1%, then the 1% doesn't compound the next year. The problem with the 1% is, at this point, we're almost built out physically, except for along Colfax. So all we can do is build up and build more density. We need to address that as council. The boards and commissions are not very good about talking to one another. We will have a meeting once a year between DDA and GURA, or between Planning Commission and GURA, but we very seldom have follow-up, and that's partly on me. I'm part of GURA. It's partly on staff. It's something that has to be addressed so that we are addressing, as boards and commissions and as council, all of these issues as a unified force. We are all representing the city when we're on those boards and commissions. The other thing about building density and the necessary density that occurs when you're building under the 1% growth is that it affects traffic, it affects safety. The more density you have along the Fort Jackson corridor, the more people are trying to walk across the street, the more danger there is. There was somebody hit in front of Golden High School the other day on a bicycle. It's not something you can use data and say, well, the national studies show that Fort and Jackson aren't fully used. If somebody gets hurt, that's a problem for me. And that's a very dangerous intersection. That's one example. There are similar examples along North Ford. Perception is reality for our citizens. And if they perceive we have an overly dense or unsafe community, they're not going to be happy with us as their representatives.
Thank you. Mr. Haseman.
Thank you, Ed. You know, interestingly enough, we talk about the old town feel, the small town feel, but in the last 10 years, the population in Golden has turned over 50%. So we're getting new people, and we are, you know, the idea of communication that Councilor Weinberg brought up about being sure all the people that come here understand the values that we have in the city. I think that that's important, but growth is a fact of life. When you see that the School of Mines grows 200 students a year, those 200 students a year are going to have to live someplace. So there's another population growth that is something that we can work very cooperatively with the School of Mines. We have a great relationship with them, and I have to say when we've got this, you know, people say, hey, there's parking issues, we can do better with it. Perhaps we can, but the solution the city had this year to improve the parking has helped the School of Mines decide to put in a parking garage. So that's the kind of cooperation that we have come to expect them for us for them, in terms of trying to control that type of traffic and parking. Density, boy, you'd be surprised to know that if you're zoned commercial, if it's 25% commercial, you can do 75% residential. Wow, I didn't know that. Well, that's the case. And so I see some of those points, and I wonder if we really want to take a closer look at the zoning. And I said that earlier. But I'm not the expert on zoning. The Planning Commission is. And I know that after this election, they are going to look at their priorities and see what the Planning Commission can do to help us better control the growth, because that's where the responsibility should be. And the council can give some guidance, can have some feeling, can set some priorities, but the experts are there at the Planning Commission. And I believe that they can do an excellent job in helping us if we make that their focus. So, hey, the town is growing. We know it, the population, it seems to be going up. Let's try to control lesser density in established neighborhoods. That's a key point. No scrapes or less scrapes, and look at our zoning.
Thank you. Before I go on to question 4, anybody need a break up there? No? Okay, I'll keep going. Notice I didn't give you any follow-ups to that one.
I had a good one.
Well, then anyway, no, I also noticed how quickly you talked. That's a little bit different. I apologize for that. But look, question 4, it starts with a statement and then the question finally comes. The city continues to grow revenues each year, but according to the Blue Ribbon Panel report, that's not going to be sustainable in the future. What ideas do you have on future revenue growth to offset the expected increase in expenditures, and elaborate on why you think your revenue sources may work? So what we're looking for here is new revenue. And let me start off with Mr. Haseman.
Well, we've talked about formation of the task force, and one of its purposes is, of course, to communicate among the different boards and commissions. All of them will be representative, and I was commenting earlier, do we talk well enough together in terms of our boards and commissions and the council? Well, that's one of the priorities for this task force, in terms of having those priorities discussed with the players, with representatives from each of those commissions and boards which are looking for funding. I know on the Parks and Rec Board, we have our long list of things we really like, and we know that the citizens, based on our survey, want them as well, but we need to find a way to pay for them. So your question is really, what are we going to do in terms of raising revenue? Well, I'm hoping that this task force can help come up with those answers. Do I have a magic, we've talked about having a lodging tax, and that we could impose a lodging tax, and that not necessarily we would pay for it individually, but that the tourists that are the beneficiaries of the great city we have, when they come to see it, they would pay for it. So there is one possible source. In Leadership Golden, I've dreamed up an idea that we might try out this next week, and that is, not that this is something I'm sponsoring. I'm just saying here was just a hypothetical. But right now, if you buy it on the internet, you don't pay sales tax if you don't have a presence in Colorado. So if you're buying from some company that's in Connecticut, there's no sales tax. Well, guess what? We've got statutes in place in Colorado and in our municipal code that permit us right this minute to collect that sales tax. And we'd have to have a big plan, and it would be something that the task force can look at to see if that's something that we can make popular enough that we will get some compliance with residents. So there are two suggestions for finance.
Okay. Ms. Steele.
Well, the lodging tax, at first I found very appealing, and I was Miss Gung-Ho on the lodging tax. Yeah, let's tax everybody coming here and staying at the hotels. And I've had a conversation with Chris Brown earlier this week, who runs the Table Mountain Inn, and he was okay with doing that. We could put a 3% lodging tax on the docket and do that, and it would raise a little bit of money. But it was also pointed out to me this week that if we just raised the sales tax, even like 0.2% or something, we would generate a whole lot of money, a whole lot much more than we would with just the lodging tax. So I think we need to look at a reasonable lodging tax, and I think we need to look at a tiny, tiny increase in the sales tax. And like Paul said, let's get these internet purchases to pay their sales tax too. So, thank you.
There's some good ideas that have been put out so far. I'm intrigued by the possibilities of the task force and looking forward to seeing what they come up with. I do have some other ideas that I think are worth pursuing. My background is energy efficiency. Basically, we make money appear by looking at how things are being used and finding ways to cut back without sacrifice. The city has already done it on several city buildings. That's part of what we do with the building codes. When you can change out light, if you change out an incandescent to an LED, you can save 75% of the cost of that in perpetuity. The more we can apply that to every city building, the more we can save. The same thing with water use. If we find ways to use it without sacrifice, we can save money, which is a saved dollar is as good as a revenue dollar. Another thing is off-season tourism. Several of the people up here have talked about how Golden gets pretty slow in the winter months. The more we can promote that, the more we're going to increase the flow through, so that the sales tax will have a larger and larger impact. I think it's really worthwhile to look at it. I love Golden in the winter. I think this city's beautiful and there's a lot of fun things to do. And I think if we get the word out about that, we're going to get more people here, and that will help. Finally, I'm still really intrigued with the idea of municipal broadband. I think the city has a role to start a organization where they can provide internet to the community, and instead of every one of us sending our money off to a corporation far away, we would be sending it to a city-run organization. Now, my vision for that is to keep it affordable, so I'm not saying there has to be a lot of revenue in there, but I think that's a real possibility. Thank you.
Mr. Reed.
GURA has been very active in the central neighborhoods and Colfax corridor, and part of the reason those districts were created was to help generate revenue for the city. We've done a couple of tax increment financing deals in Gateway Village and along Colfax that are going to generate revenue for years to come. A lot of that revenue comes back to the city, both in money that goes to GURA, but also the developer gets a portion of that. Once the GURA timeframe pans out, then all the sales tax goes to the city. So we will have some revenue coming in along Colfax. Unfortunately, the car dealers don't help us out. The Harley dealer doesn't help us out with that. I am not in favor of increasing the sales tax, at least as it applies to food. That is a regressive tax on the poor, and I just cannot support that. Lodging tax, I think, is something that's very viable, especially if it's applied to the Airbnb folks. They should be treated equally with the rest of the lodging establishments in the city. But it's something that it warrants investigation. Another possibility that's been explored by some of the mountain communities that have similar geographic limitations is a transfer tax on real property. I do not know that that's something that our citizens would support, but it's something that when you do a real estate transaction in Aspen or Breckenridge, you negotiate that 1% into either the buyer or the seller side, and that money goes back into the community to help fund other programs. If that's a priority for us to generate or use money for programs, that's a revenue source we could explore.
Thank you.
As far as sustainable revenue growth goes, for years down the road and for decades down the road, to ensure that it keeps growing as it needs to meet our growing demands, I believe one of the things that we can do is to encourage small business development. A lot of revenue stream is generated off of businesses and the sales they make because of the sales tax that's already in place. I'm not in favor for an increase in the sales tax. I've worked for a lot of small businesses here in Golden, and I currently do work for a small business here in Golden. I find that if you're working somewhere and your product isn't selling very much and you're not making enough money, if you think raising the price on that product to fill your pocket of that deficit, that's not going to be the right way to go about it because people are going to want to buy that product somewhere else. I think something to do would be to encourage people to shop local. Why would I want to go down the street to buy this jacket from a store if I can get online and buy it for much cheaper, and then I don't have to pay any kind of sales tax other than just the basic state sales tax? So I think that's something we need to look into is how do we get people to go out here and shop local? That's very important. If we can do that as a city, if we support ourselves, I believe that will help with the sustainability and the revenue growth. Also with new developments. This might be able to help with two different birds. One of them being revenue and one of them being the growth. People are concerned with how things are growing and with new developments, and if there's a cost, an increased cost in these developments for these developers to come in and break new ground, not only will we generate money off of that if we increase that, but it also might be less of an incentive for people to want to break this ground to build these new developments. I'm running out of time, but lastly, maybe some transportation. If we're getting congested and we're talking about how there isn't adequate transportation systems within the city, maybe we can look into implementing one that is a revenue-building transportation system for the city, and not just through the RTD or the call and ride, but something that's a little bit more permanent for Golden itself.
Thank you. Who am I on now? Ms. Weinberg.
Thank you. Both in the Blue Ribbon Report and in a lot of our conversations that we've had over the years since then, the revenues that we bring in for the city meets our current expenditures, and it meets our growing expenditures, but it's really just to maintain what we already have. It's to maintain the things that we appreciate and often don't even notice, and that's our public safety, the fact that a fire truck will show up at our house at any time of day or night if we need it, that our roads don't have huge potholes, and we have wonderful infrastructure. We can support all of that with our current revenue sources. What the Blue Ribbon panel identified and what we talk about is the fact that we have a lot of great plans and a lot of great people who have envisioned terrific projects for the city, and we do not have the ability to fund those projects. What always bothered me about the Blue Ribbon Panel is it identified many ways to raise revenue. We've talked about some lodging tax, sales tax, there's bonding, there's property tax, there's all sorts of ways. There's no corresponding panel report that says how we should spend that money, just how we can raise the money. We haven't gone through the process to prioritize. If we do generate additional revenue, how do we as a community want to spend that? Which one of those competing priorities and those wonderful projects and plans should we spend that additional $1 million, $5 million, $10 million? Where does that go? And can we all agree that we are willing to either take on that cost ourselves as residents or put it on someone else, a business, a tourist, for that priority? So I am really hopeful that this new investment task force will help answer that other side of the equation. Not the how do we raise revenue, but really how should we be spending any additional revenue that we decide to raise.
Thank you. Mr. Sung.
So for me, I think that this issue is important to me because I think, I think this reflects my philosophy where I am an eternal optimist. And so I think that the answer isn't, and I would be fairly uncomfortable with any type of tax increases anywhere. For me, the philosophical solution is really how do you grow revenues without taxing? And so for me, I mentioned this earlier, but I think the city charter really does limit us in that regard where over a decade ago, we really, I think were hamstrung by the fact that we can't offer incentives to new businesses. And so that's, to me, that's a problem where I think that there's a lot of underutilized areas in Golden that can be better utilized if there were some incentives. I'm not talking about selling the farm and giving things away, but something very smart and thoughtful in terms of some kind of incremental incentive. And so I think, that's one approach. For me, the answer is truly a multi-tiered approach where that would be one thing to look at. I think another thing that really matters to me would be this idea of shopping and buying Golden, where I think that that's another option when combined with that first option of creating a more diverse business community where we have more restaurants or more businesses in general, more retail. When you combine those two, you can get increased revenues in a good way where people want to spend that money because you have different businesses here. And so I think when you put those two things together, I think that's the starting point of any discussion in terms of how we bridge the gap between revenues and expenditures. And really, I think that there are other things like business improvement districts and public-private partnerships. Those are things that are all on the table, but you need to frame the issue for any type of task force, and I think that that's the important thing, and that's the role of city council is to provide those ideas and then facilitate those discussions. And so I think that that's where I stand, where I would really want to dive deeper into some of those options.
Okay. Well, we heard some different positions on the question. You want to follow up, Paul?
Well, you said we could do it. I was just thinking, when we talk about buying in Golden, we think it's a good thing to say, but what we may not know is we used to have a Buy Golden Week. We had it right here in the city, and there's, that can be put back into place. But we can make it stronger. We can have it be more long-term, not just do it for a week. And I know that if we get this idea before the Chamber of Commerce and DDA, I'm sure that we will get a lot of support for a Buy Golden program, which is more pervasive. And that is a chance where we'd not have to raise taxes, but we actually are just having people buying locally. And I think that would be a really good idea. I'd like to see Buy Golden.
Good idea.
I'm going to move on to the fifth question, and I will not take any credit for planning this one. City Council has discussed submitting a ballot question to the voters to establish a lodging tax. Do you favor, oppose, or suggest more study on such a tax and why? And I will start with Mr. Sung.
So based on the answer to my previous question, I certainly at the very least would want more study, but really even before that, I would be fairly uncomfortable with some kind of increase or implementation of a lodging tax, where I think that there are other ways to increase revenues. And so for me, it really would be taking a look at these other alternatives that I discussed previously, where I think that if you create the right type of, in this case, hotels or businesses or industry that really serves the lodging industry, that's the starting point for me. Is I think that there's so many options there where to come out of the gate with a tax increase would make me uncomfortable, and so I think that that's where really it would be in the role of studying the issue and really having space to discuss that issue, but philosophically, that's where I would start those discussions.
Ms. Steele?
I was just going to say I have a different view of it. We have looked at the lodging tax, and there has been studies done. Leadership Golden did its own investigation into the lodging tax. Everybody around us, all the other cities around us have a lodging tax. For us to implement a 3% lodging tax, I think is a no-brainer. I think we need to do it. It's not going to impact the residents of Golden. I think we're leaving money on the table if we don't go ahead and pursue a lodging tax.
Thank you. Mr. Haseman?
What she said. No, I told you about that sense of humor. It creeps in every now and then. The raising revenue of the lodging tax does make some sense. You worry now, are we going to chase tourists away because we have a lodging tax? Well, tourists, wherever else they go, they already pay the lodging tax. There's no place they go that they don't pay it. So we're not having it here is going to be no surprise or no. But if you go to New York and you see your lodging tax is a monstrous figure, well, then you kind of get a little bit of a hiccup. But we're not talking about that. If we had a 3% lodging tax, that would be at the low end of what other cities are charging in lodging. I think we should put a small lodging tax, see how it goes, what impact it has, and then decide if we want to adjust it. Meanwhile, I know that this task force with regard to Golden Investment Task Force, they're going to look at that. And do we want to study it to death? I don't know if we want to jump ahead of them or let them look at it and look at some of the alternatives. I certainly welcome the task force looking at it. You asked me what I feel, and I've told you that's how I feel.
Thanks, Paul. Ms. Weinberg?
All right, I've been part of this city council discussion on lodging tax, and we have talked about it a couple of times. And we are the only city in the area, if I remember my chart of cities and percentages, right, that does not have a lodging tax. I don't think this is a competitive advantage or any kind of advantage for our hotels in the city. One of the main reasons why I've been unwilling to support it as of yet is because I'm unwilling to ask voters to vote for a tax before being able to tell them how the city will spend that increased money. If we are going to ask for a tax, we better know how the city is going to spend the money we receive from that tax. So that's where, again, I think we've reached this point where we have the investment task force, and that's to identify the priorities of where we would spend additional revenue, and that would include this issue of a lodging tax. The second thing that we haven't done yet as a city that I brought forward and we started talking about this year, and I think we're going to be talking about it for a while, is who would get charged the lodging tax? How do we define lodging? Is it just the commercial bed and breakfast, or is it the Airbnb? Is it just the big hotels that we have, or is it also some of the smaller, maybe short-term rentals in the area? How do we, as a community, currently define lodging, and is that the appropriate definition for who would then get taxed by a lodging tax? So we have a lot to figure out, and really define better before I would feel comfortable asking voters to vote on a lodging tax.
Sheridan?
off the bat, at first glance, I'm going to have to say that I don't think it's going to be as worthwhile as it could be for the amount of time and effort that's going to be put into the research to find out about the lodging tax. The lodging tax itself and all the parameters it has, and like Laura said, where's that money going to go? And I feel that way about every tax. I think if you're going to put a tax on something, there needs to be a plausible reason for that tax. You can't just say we're going to put this tax in place to build revenue. It's like, okay, well you did, but where's that revenue going to go? What is it for? At the same time, too, you're only going to be targeting the businesses that have lodging, which I feel is kind of calling out one section of business in town and saying, hey, like, we're gonna put our lack of revenue on you guys, and that's, I don't see that that's entirely fair to their business, and I think we're better off putting our time and effort into just figuring out how to build revenue at the businesses that already exist, looking into bringing back the business weeks that we have here in Golden, or shop locally. If we put our time, money, and effort into solving those problems, we're not going to have to look for this increased revenue stream from this lodging tax that doesn't have a home to where it's going.
Mr. Reed.
Let me start by clarifying or amending my last response. When I suggested a 1% transfer tax, that's because I was throwing out an idea that we all need to consider, because all taxes are subject to Tabor, and we as voters would have to approve them. With respect to the lodging tax, it is my belief that generally travelers expect to pay a lodging tax when they travel inside the United States. Just about any place you go, you're paying a lodging tax. It is taxed onto the traveler. It is not taxed onto the hotels. It is supposed to be taxed on VRBO's Airbnb in Denver, to the extent that they have been able to catch up with some of those people. So generally speaking, I support the lodging tax. I share Laura's concern about, I don't want to tax just so we can spend. If we have a community priority that we want to use our additional revenue for, then I feel it's appropriate to put it to voters. It is not appropriate to put it to voters and say, here are all the priorities we've identified in Golden Vision 2030. We're going to spend it on something here. So I think if we were going to proceed with any sort of a tax increase of any type, we need to identify where that's going to be expended. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
A lot of great points have been made. In the big picture sense, I do agree with the potential of a lodging tax. All the traveling I've done, I've found I've paid quite a bit everywhere, and I think it would be fair for other travelers that come to my city to chip in their fair piece. That being said, I think I also agree with other people who have said it's important to figure out where we're going to spend it. This is based on the Blue Ribbon report that says we're making our budgets now, but things could change in the future. I wouldn't feel comfortable just saying, well, we should raise money just because we should raise more money. On the other hand, there are good ideas that we would like to implement. Vision 2030 lays them out, and if we can justify this tax to make things better, it has a real implication on the tourists. They come here for our open space, so if we purchase more open space with this lodging tax, it seems to me they're getting value for their money. However, but in addition, one thing I would be very interested in is establishing a baseline, figuring out how many of rooms are filled year-round, and really measuring what the impact of this tax was. If we put a 3% tax on and see 10% fewer people coming here and spending money both at the lodging and at cafes and restaurants, that's a big problem. So I'd also be very much in favor of establishing our baseline and keeping an eye on that and seeing the real impact of a lodging tax. But I do support it in principle.
Yes, Mr. Sun.
May I respond?
Certainly.
So I think that on this issue, it is very nuanced, and it's so timely that I just feel compelled to talk a little bit more about it. You know, I think the first point I would make is just because everyone else does it doesn't make it right. I think that that's something to keep in mind. You know, and I think that Laura brings up an excellent point where it's this discomfort with the lack of precision in how that money is going to be spent, where I think those are absolutely two big things, where I think it's the trap or the lure of easy money, where I think that that's the superficialness that I'm concerned with, where I think that I'm not suggesting that we don't do it, but I do think that in isolation, or if that's the perceived low-hanging fruit without supporting that, I think that's a real problem. And I think that for me, it's not a single tool solution. It's not just increasing taxes, it's combining that with something else, where I think that you can really grow revenues if you're thoughtful about it and you don't have to increase taxes. And so I think that it needs to be done if we do it, it needs to be done in conjunction with other things. And that's I think where I feel the discomfort with this idea of just the lodging tax as a solution to growing revenues.
Steele?
I was just going to say, I think there's enough on the long, long list of things that we want to do that we could find a place to put the revenue generated by that lodging tax. And I think the investment tax force can help us decide that. What I'm afraid is that as time goes on and we study it and we study it, and we pay for these studies and we debate it, we're losing money as every day goes by, and we're spending money on studying the issue. And I understand studying the issue, that's great, but I do not believe that a lodging tax is going to hurt Golden at all. I think it will be a helpful tool for helping us achieve some of those new initiatives that were presented to us. So.
30 seconds.
30 seconds, okay. I agree with Councilor Weinberg about we need to know what we're spending it on. If we're going to take something to the public with regard to a ballot initiative, they're going to want to know, where's this money going to be going? So that is a priority that has to be set, and I don't know if it'll be the investment forum that does it, or the council, or it's just paging through that thick book of wants and needs and setting those priorities. But I believe that we can do that, and I do not believe we have to wait a few years to bring it into effect.
Okay. It's now, Mike, you want to say something, Mikey?
I just want to just state that, no taxation without representation. It's just something that's very important. And I think we're better off with these short-term guests that are coming to these hotels and staying at the Tail Mountain Inn and staying at the Golden Hotel and staying at these Airbnbs to market to them the shoppability of our town. It's walkable. Let's get them out there. Let's put our efforts and studies into how do we get these people out into these streets to shop, because there's a lot more revenue to be generated if we can get these people in these short stays to shop in our town than to put a 3% tax on their stay.
Okay, we're going to move to the close now. Everybody gets 2 minutes. We're going to start on this end, since we started on that end at the beginning with Mr. Allen, and we'll let Councilor Weinberg have the last say. So go ahead, Micah.
Great, thank you. I know it's late, so I want to start out by thanking everybody for sticking here with us. I'd also like to thank the organizers, the moderators, and particularly every other one of the candidates that came tonight. It's pretty clear to me that everybody up here loves our little city and is running not only to keep it wonderful, but to make it even better. So you've heard a lot of great ideas tonight, and I'm sure you'll hear more in the lead up to the election, but I'd like to just quickly recap my priorities. 1, municipal broadband. If I've learned anything from watching Sesame Street with my daughter, it's that things are far better when we cooperate. Instead of every one of us paying a far-off corporation for internet, we can make it faster and better by working together. Golden agrees with me, and that's why this time last year we voted to allow the city to look into it. Now it's time we do it together. 2nd, deliberate development. I know the first time I came to Golden, my big thought was, they let people live here? It's amazing. And so there's going to be a lot of pressure of people trying to come into Golden. Although growth is inevitable, it's essential that new development fits with the community that it comes into, not redefine the community that it comes into. The flip side of that question is affordable housing. I think it's equally important to our beautiful scenery and historic skyline is our inclusive culture and people from different walks of life. So I think it's really important to include priorities that can make it affordable for different families. Finally, practical sustainability. It doesn't have to be and should not be about spending a fortune on cool whiz-bang technology. There's a lot of effective, efficient, practical things the city can do to save money and energy and water, and I'm very interested in pursuing those opportunities. Finally, I just would like to bring the methodical, practical process of an engineer to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. My wife, Kristen, and I have been married nearly 20 years. After 20 years, you think you know somebody. You're convinced you know somebody. Last week, we took a trip to Redstone and Marble. With town names like that, how can you not talk about the Flintstones? So we were talking about the old cartoon, The Flintstones, and remembering the names of the towns and the characters. I learned two things about Kristen during that conversation. First, I would never have guessed she watched the Flintstones. Second, I would never have guessed that she knew the words to the Flintstones theme song. Kristen, I love her to death, generally knows 2 lines to every song and only 2 lines to every song. She knew almost the entire Flintstones song. I feel about Golden the way I feel about my beloved spouse. You can't know Golden in a short time. I've been here my entire life, and I'm learning about Golden every single day. It takes years to truly get to know Golden, just like it takes years to truly get to know your spouse. I think you need to understand the community to help lead it. And having been here for as long as I have, I feel like I have a good grasp on what people want. I also feel I have a lot of contacts in the community to reach out to let me know what they think the community wants. Because this office is not about me, it is about you. It's about the citizens. Golden is home to the Colorado School of Mines. We're the home to innovators and entrepreneurs. Anyone that attended the mayor's community celebration this week got a glimpse of some of our amazing citizens. One of the best tools we as a town have is to know what resources are available and how to leverage those resources. Our citizens are our best resources. I pledge that if I'm elected, I will use my constituents, I will reach out to those resources and those who are more knowledgeable than me and work towards Golden's future without losing Golden's past.
Thank you. Deborah?
As I said in my opening statements, I am very committed to Golden. I think I have proven my commitment, and I will continue to prove my commitment whether or not I am elected to City Council. I have a good background. I have a background as a lobbyist on Capitol Hill in DC for clean energy and clean water. I've run a nonprofit. I've run a business. I've had an interesting life experience. I'm old enough to have an interesting background and some good experience, but yet still young enough to serve the people of Golden for quite some time coming up. Again, some of my issues, I'm very concerned about mitigating density. I'm concerned about sustainability, public transportation, but mainly keeping the roads and avenues for communication with the community open and expanding those opportunities to work with everyone in the community so that we can all express our commitment to Golden by coming up with a good future for Golden. Thank you.
Paul?
Well, thank you all for coming this evening. It is Thursday night. I don't know, unfortunately, the Rockies are no longer on television, but it's still great for you guys to turn out. And for those at home that are watching, thanks for not turning to some other channel. For the council to be successful, it has to work together. It has to work as a team. It has to listen. Half of communication is listening. And I know that Councilor Brown and Councilor Sheriff Graves have instituted Coffee with Counselor to go out and listen to their constituents every month. You know, those are good steps. We need to do more on the council to listen, as well as the boards and commissions to listen, so that they all can understand what the pulse of the community, and to be able to achieve what the community wants as we all strive to keep Golden the small town look and feel that we have cherished for years to come, and hope in the past and for years to come. I look forward on the council of doing a lot of listening and responding to the concerns of the residents in my ward and across the city. My wife and I love the city, and I have to say in humility that we probably need the city a lot more than it needs me. But as I look out there and see a few smiles, I want you to know that I do have some experience, I do have the desire, I do have the passion, and I think the ability to do a good job representing you on the city council. Thank you.
Dan.
So I'm going to end tonight with the same question that I asked at the beginning of this forum. Why vote for me? Earlier I said I had 3 reasons, so for those of you that were paying attention, I didn't forget the 3rd reason. I actually just saved it for last. It's the best for last. The most compelling reason to vote for me is that my family and I are genuinely and authentically connected to Golden. We've lived here for 11 action-packed years. There's never been a dull moment, and so those 11 years feel like a lifetime of experiences. And that's why we have the pulse of the community. It's from those many different perspectives, where from a good citizen perspective, I'm an alumnus of the Leadership Golden program. I've served as the chair of the City of Golden's Campaign Finance Committee. I'm a soon-to-be graduate of the City of Golden's Public Works Academy. I've served on Jefferson County's Historical Commission. From a work perspective, I've served many years on the board of directors for On Tap Credit Union, which is Golden's very own member-owned credit union, which one day would like to serve every single resident of Golden. I have many friends and neighbors who own businesses in Golden, or just in everyday life, seeing you at our farmers markets and our First Fridays, or special events like our pancake breakfast at the fire station, the Golden Gallop, trick-or-treating on Washington Avenue, which, by the way, is a perfect example of how our generous community comes together. Where else do you see the business community really providing the forum and the experience where it's a safe and fun environment for our kids? From all of this, I hope it's clear that regardless of whether I'm on city council, I will always be with you when it comes to Golden. I get it. I get Golden because I really have experienced and have been listening this whole time. Thank you so much, and I really hope for your vote this November.
Mikey.
I'd like to start by thanking the Golden Leadership Golden, for hosting tonight's event and to get us all together. And I just think it's awesome that all the people sitting at this table have such an appreciation for this town. Being here my entire life, I absolutely love Golden with all my heart. I'm passionate about it, and I'm proud. When I go somewhere and somebody asks me, where are you from? I am so excited that I get to say, I'm from Golden. I live in Golden. And a lot of times they're like, well, where's that? And I find that to be interesting. But what I want the viewers to take away from this is that I want to advocate for the best interests of this city. I want to work with a close relationship with the residents and with the businesses. I like to develop and recommend alternative solutions to problems that we might have, to bring a fresh perspective to the board and possibly a different perspective to the board. I would like to oversee the downtown development being done in a responsible way, and to make sure that you're happy. What I've done here tonight is mostly express my opinions on these questions and issues, but really what it comes down to is I want to hear what your opinions and ideas are on these questions that we've been asked, because that's what my job would be, is to listen to you, the citizens of my town. And so that's number one in my book is the residents, and getting myself out there and getting to know you. I've gotten to know a lot of the people in this town, and there's still a lot more to meet and more that come every year. But I'd like to thank everybody that came here tonight, everybody that watched on TV and is still watching. And I'd like to ask you for your vote this November for Ward 4, and I pledge to do my very best and to work my hardest for you because I love this place and I don't see myself going anywhere.
Laura.
Thank you. I want to add my thanks to the great crowd here tonight and the people watching from home. I know that we all know that not enough people pay attention to municipal elections. So thank you for showing up, for paying attention, and for voting this November. I also want to say thank you to all my fellow candidates up here, to our moderator, and to Leadership Golden for hosting this forum tonight for the community. And before I get to my actual closing remarks, I have to say, Leadership Golden, just a little something to think about. This was a terrific forum and a terrific departure from our usual business meetings and community meetings. And I think it'd be really great if maybe you could consider, talk about it, hosting a forum for the community on a particular topic, maybe something like question number 3 you threw at us with all those various parts, but something of the community's interest that would allow for a bit more discussion, some more expertise up here, but something that would allow a greater community input on some of these important topics since you do this so well. Golden is the wonderful city that we love today because of the strong leadership of prior councils and the activism of prior residents here. It will take strong leadership and hard work to continue to steer Golden towards the Golden vision that we share and to the future that we all want for Golden. I have demonstrated during my 4 years on council a willingness to listen and to work hard, the ability to analyze tough issues, and to advocate for better solutions. It has been my real honor to represent Ward 4 these past 4 years, and I hope that I have your vote this election in November to allow me to continue representing you in all of Ward 4 for another 4 years. So I want to say thank you. Thank you for letting me have the last word tonight, and this has been a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Notice, on time.
Yeah.
All right. Listen, I think you learned a lot about the candidates tonight. And those people that are watching at home, the same thing. And I hope that others watch the tapes that will be provided going forward between now and Election Day. You certainly know where they stand on taxes. I even heard somebody talk about getting rid of the prohibiting council from granting business incentives. Think where we would be today if we didn't have King Soopers and Kohl's and those kind of places, which required an incentive. So you learned a lot, and I want to thank Leadership Golden. To answer Laura's question, about a dozen years ago, we ran many of those kind of discussions you talked about. Bond issues for the schools, sales tax on food, repealing the 1%, repealing the prohibition on sales taxes. We had all of those, and it's a good idea that I encouraged Leadership Golden to start running them again. We used to have them in the Mountaineering Center, but now we got a good venue here. So, audience, I think we had a great time tonight. How about some clapping for our candidates? So, in closing, vote. That's all I can tell you.
Really sad.